Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 26th session of the Bellingham City Council. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have 6 announcements. The first is a budget work session on November 2nd at 1 p.m. to continue budget presentations. A budget work session on November 9th at 10 a.m. to continue the presentations on the city budget. A public hearing on November 9th at 7 p.m. to consider amendment to the York Neighborhood Plan proposed by the York Neighborhood Association. The proposed revisions are intended to clarify the current language for Area 1, encouraging the city to possibly acquire the industrial land along Whatcom Creek and/or obtain easements as redevelopment occurs. The proposal also provides some guidance for future opportunities for multifamily zoning along the northern side of Meter Avenue. We will have another public hearing on November 9th to consider a draft ordinance amending the 2016 Bellingham Comprehensive Plan to add new policies related to food access. We will have another public hearing on November 9th on a proposed resolution of the Bellingham City Council providing for the city to relinquish pursuant to RCW 35-94-040. A general utility is the easement obtained by Ordinance 2019-052-11. Recorded under AF 201908-01472, which is the easterly 25th foot portion of South State Street abutting lots 1 to 5, Block 4, plat of the town of Bellingham, and 10-foot portion of Easton Avenue abutting the aforementioned portion of South State Street within the city of Bellingham, commonly known as 614 and 622 11th Street, Bellingham, Washington, on the grounds that said portion of the easement is surplus to the city's need and is not required for providing a continued public utility services. We will also have a public hearing on November 9th, 2020 at 7 p.m. on a preliminary 2021 biennial budget. By that time, we'll be in a sleeping bag and we will be wearing pajamas, but we will be here doing our jobs. Okay, now we will go to the Pledge of Allegiance, and please join Councilmember Dan Hamill in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Council President. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now go to the mayor.
Jean, we need to do roll call.
Good idea. Roll call.
Lisa Anderson.
Here.
Michael Lilliquist.
I'm here.
Pinky Vargas.
Excused.
Dan Hamill.
Here.
Holly Huffman.
Here.
Hannah Stone.
Here.
Jean Knudsen.
Here. Okay, we'll now turn it over to the mayor for an update on COVID-19 response.
Council President Knudsen, if I could, I think we will do the whole thing, if it's all right to take that out of order, just do the mayor's report after the public hearing and the comment.
Sure.
Okay.
So are you going to do the, do we have a COVID report tonight?
Well, I think what we're going to do is
We
we're
want to do that afterward. Okay.
tie it into the mayor's report, and I'll introduce it when we're done.
Okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, we'll now go to a public hearing. It's a public hearing on the 2021-2022 revenue forecast, including the 2021 property taxes. Turn over to Forrest Longman.
Thank you. Mute myself there. Yeah, so this is a revenue forecast that's required as RCW prior to passing the 2021 property tax levy. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Hopefully you are looking at the presentation.
Yep.
Great. So this is going to be a high-level overview of the overall revenue picture with a focus on revenues in the general fund. The final portion will go into some detail about the property tax. Jumping in, the underlying theme of this forecast is uncertainty. This forecast represents one scenario that we think is fairly likely. There are a lot of things that could change. First and foremost, there's what's going to happen with COVID-19 in the next 6 to 12 months. Any further shutdowns would have a major impact, but so would a vaccine or another advancement against the virus. The election next month may also impact the forecast. It could bring some higher probability of further stimulus, which could further boost the economy and potentially provide direct support to municipal governments. The city relies on consumer spending for two of its major revenue sources, the B&O tax and the sales tax. I'm going to talk about these a fair amount in the first part of our presentation because they're the most impacted by the current recession. These two charts that you're seeing are meant to provide a snapshot of how consumers are behaving nationally. On the top, we have here the University of Michigan Survey of Consumer Sentiment, and on the bottom is real personal consumption expenditures. The gray columns denote recessions, both the current recession and the recession in 2008. Notably, if we look at the expenditures in the last recession, we didn't see the kind of deep drop off we had now. It was more of a slowing. This time it really dove down, obviously, as the shutdowns happened, but it's far below where it was pre-recession. And we see both sentiment and personal consumption expenditures are far below what they were pre-recession. And so that gives reason to be a bit pessimistic about our forecast. This shows retail sales and food service on a year-over-year basis since January. So for any given month, how different is it from the same month in 2019? As you can see on the green chart is the green line is the national numbers, and the dashed line here is 0. So a 0 would mean that spending is the same as it was in 2019. So we can see that the national numbers, things have actually improved, and they've been consistently above 2019 numbers since June. But locally, this blue line, it has not gotten to 0 yet for food service and retail sales. And in fact, it got close in July, but it has actually since come back down in August, down below a -5%. So we're expecting this trend to sort of continue through the end of the year and into the beginning of next year, where those numbers stay below 2019 levels, and see as things play out next year, hopefully it will increase slightly. We think maybe this little bump in July was due to the stimulus and the enhanced unemployment, but having those not in place now, it's worrying that we may see a gap in the recovery. Unemployment rates are dropping but remain high. Again, Bellingham is the blue line. You can see it right here. It's at about 9.4% as of August there, those most recent numbers. That's about a percentage point higher than both the nation and the state. It's a typical gap, that 1% gap, as you can see back here. There's always a little bit of a gap. But it's unclear if this downward trajectory will be maintained with the economic state, or if we're going to start seeing a leveling off on this, or more downward pressure happens as the weather turns. But again, a little pessimism in the forecast here with this 9.4% unemployment rate. And then for a bright spot here, we're looking at our permit activity here in the city. This is year-to-date permit activity through September. So each year is only showing January through September. So it's an apples-to-apples comparison. The bars are the number of permits issued and the units issued, and the line is the value. So we can see the number of permits is down a little bit, but the units is nice and high, and the value is high, and so that gives us some optimism. It's maybe suggesting more multifamily activity. And overall, we know the housing market is strong. That's true everywhere in the country. It's buoyed by very low interest rates. And obviously Bellingham is a place of high demand, especially as people in places like Seattle can potentially work from home a little bit more. We're expecting that area to stay relatively strong, at least through the first half or most of next year. So I showed this chart last time I did the forecast, but it's worth a reminder of where the city's money comes from. B&O tax on the left here, which represents about 20% of our general fund revenues, can see is really dominated by retail activity, 21%, and healthcare at 25%. And then on the sales tax, and just to note that both of those have been heavily impacted by COVID. And then on the sales tax side, which is also about 20% of our general fund revenues, retail sales represents 51%, huge piece. Construction, though, is 15%. That's a pretty big piece, and construction is level for the year. Actually, it went down quite a bit, but it's come back very strongly since that industry was allowed to open back up, and so it's right at 2019 levels. And actually, that makes up a pretty good chunk of our retail trade. Construction does too. Can be tied into that through the purchase of materials and such. However, sales tax is brought down by this accommodation and food service, which makes up 11% and is down 36% on the year. So what does that mean overall for 2020? This is the same chart I've been showing council for a while now. This is all our various revenues: sales tax, utility tax, B&O tax, property tax, and others. So the four big ones plus all the small pieces sort of come together in one. And then the red line is what we were initially expecting the budget to bring in when we built the budget at the mid-biennium. So we've got a bit of a gap there, about 8%, still what we're expecting the general fund revenue shortfall to be. So again, sales and B&O tax are the most impacted. And we have seen an uptick in some sectors over the last couple of periods, but it's not clear that we're establishing a new trend. So for 2021, again, we have this high degree of uncertainty. So we've taken a conservative approach to forecasting, and as things change, we'll need to analyze the changes as well and change as well. At the current stage, we're forecasting a slow pace to recovery, especially on the B&O and sales tax sides. And as COVID is unknown what the future holds with that. We are assuming that the council takes a 1% property tax increase. And then we're expecting some of the other minor revenue source, fines, fees, activity-based revenues in the city to recover a little more quickly as more operational paths forward are discovered. This is our overall citywide revenues. So we are saying for the biennium, we're expecting $582 million in revenues. I'll touch on a couple of these big pieces. Taxes, obviously that's those big four tax areas that I mentioned in the general fund, but it's also outside of the general fund. It's the transportation tax, sales tax, the street fund sales tax, the greenways levy, the housing levy, and some other smaller taxes. Another big chunk is the charges for goods and services you see. That is includes all of our utility charges, water, sewer, and stormwater. It also includes all of our interfund charges, including our internal healthcare payments, and things like charges for the county pays us for our EMS activities related to the EMS levy that the county runs. So overall, $582 million of revenues, $664 million in expenditures, with the difference coming from reserves. And just to touch on that one more time, that's a typical amount of reserves to use more generally through the city as we save up money and we use them for one-time projects. A lot of that's related to the capital expenditures. Now on the general fund side, shown year by year here, $88 million is what we brought in 2019. That we're forecasting to be down to 80 in 2020, with that modest increases of 81 into 81.5 in 21 and 83 in 22. Now on this side, we're using quite a bit of reserves, especially in 2020. We've reorganized to take less reserves in 2021 as we implement furloughs and free some positions. But then use of reserves comes back up, and this we feel is more reserves than is probably a good idea to take, especially as we look to the long term. Now, next up is our long-term forecast chart. So this chart, the blue area is all the revenues, and then the line is expenditures, and the bars down here are the reserves. On the left of this, where it changes colors, this is actuals, and on the right is the forecast. And you can see in 2019, we did a pretty good job of spending pretty close to what we brought in. In 2020, we're expecting a pretty big gap between expenditures and revenues, and we see the reserves bar go down. Gets a little smaller for 2021, and then in 2022, we're expecting to probably reevaluating this. And then long term, the gap gets bigger in the out years. And I will say this is basically always how this chart looks. It's important to recognize, that barring the very strong economic growth that we've enjoyed over the last few years, the windfalls we've had from things like the Wayfair decision, which gave us the right to collect sales tax on mail order purchases, Amazon purchases, that type of thing, and the GEMT program, the Ground Emergency Medical Transport Program, which provides backfill money for the cost of what it costs us to provide ambulance services and what we're paid from Medicare and Medicaid, fills in that gap, which has brought in millions of dollars over the last couple of years. There is a structural imbalance to the city. Our employees' costs increase annually, and we don't have a clear path forward to sustain them. However, the reality of the situation is that we manage to our constraints. The city can reduce its costs when needed and can identify new revenue solutions. And despite this type of graph being shown every year, this outcome hasn't really come true, this big funding gap that we're always pointing to. But it takes constant financial awareness and discipline to ensure that it doesn't. So we must be disciplined to ensure that we don't end up in the situation shown in this chart, basically. Now I'm going to go through the forecast for our main 4 revenue sources in the general fund, beginning with B&O. And this is a tax on business activity in the city. We are anticipating a 12% reduction in 2020, with a modest increase in 2021 of 2%, followed by 2.5% in 2022. For our utility taxes, we're actually expecting a pretty minor reduction, 1.2 this year, kind of in line with what we saw last year. And then we're projecting pretty flat growth for the following 2 years. It's particularly difficult to project this revenue source due to the nature of the revenues. And to illustrate that, I've included this chart on the right here, which is the year-over-year change in revenues from each source. So most dramatic here is the natural gas, right? So in 2014, from 2013 to 2014, those revenues increased by 20%. And the next year they were down 5%. The year after that, they were down an additional 15%. Then after that, popped back up 15%. On the electric side, we see a similar trend, although less dramatic. And that's really because those sources are really driven by the weather. And so that makes them very difficult to forecast. And then from our cable and telephone utilities, we've had just consistent downward trajectory as those revenues have been declining consistently for several years as people cut the cord and telephone operators move from charging for the telephone service to the data service. And we expect that to continue as we go along here. But we've taken a flat approach, as we know that the city's revenue, the city utilities, water and sewer and stormwater, grow at a relatively normal pace, but that's offset by the negatives from these other utilities and the inclement and the jumping around of the weather-based utilities. On to sales tax. As we mentioned, a reduction this year, about 8%, and then again that modest growth at 2.5%, 2.9%, 21, 22. 22 we get to around 2.9%, which is getting pretty close to on par with our historic growth rates. For property tax, our last major revenue source, in property tax, we're expecting a 1% increase this year. Next year, we know from new construction, we've gotten some numbers from the assessor. It's going to be about a 2.2% increase if we have the 1% plus new construction. 2022, we expect that growth to slow slightly. I will say in 2019, we saw this big jump, and that was the $1 million increase to the home levy, went from $3 million to $4 million. Now, for an individual taxpayer, how their tax bill is distributed, about 20% goes to the city of Bellingham. And the larger portions, 35% goes to the school district and 30% goes to the state, which also much of which goes to the school district. The county makes up a relatively smaller portion of sales tax or property tax bill. The property tax levy is fairly complicated, and every year there are a number of questions about it. So we thought this year we would dive into a bit more detail on how the property tax levy is established. In Washington State, we have a budget-based property tax. So council sets a dollar amount, which is statutory limited to 1% increase a year plus new construction. Then we take that budgeted property tax amount, and then we divide it by the assessed value divided by 1,000 to get the levy rate, which is the rate per $1,000 of assessed valuation. So that assessed value divided by 1,000 gets us to $1,000 per assessed value. The maximum rate is $3.60. An individual bill then takes the assessed valuation of their property, divides it by 1,000 to get to that per $1,000 of assessed valuation, and then just multiplies it by that levy rate that we got to up here. And I'm actually going to go through a couple examples because I think it's helpful in understanding how this tax works. In year one, so we have a fictional city here with two properties in it, and one of them's worth in year one $350,000, and the other one's worth $450,000. So it has a total AV of $800,000, and they're not increasing their tax rate this year. So the budgeted levy is $1,000. That's all the money that this city is going to bring in. So to get the rate, they take that $1,000, divide it by 800,000, divide by 1,000 to get to the per thousand rate, and you get a levy rate of $1.25 per $1,000 of AV. So they simply multiply that by the assessed $1,000 per $1,000 of assessed valuation. And for property one, it's a $437 tax bill. Property two, it's $562, and that brings in that total of 1,000. Now in year two, they do the 1% levy increase, but additionally, the assessed valuation is increased by $900,000, to $900,000, an increase of $100,000, but it's not equally distributed. Property one goes up by $25,000. Property two goes up by $75,000. The budgeted levy goes up 1% to 1,010, and we get to this levy rate of $1.12. So the levy rate has gone down because the AV went up. Now we take that and we calculate the tax bills. Property one, their tax bill actually went down to $420, $16 less. While property two, theirs went up $26 to $589. Now together, that gets us the $10 of AV of levy amount change. So it's a little complicated, but I think that sort of clears up. It's the interaction between the assessed valuation and the budgeted dollar amount that the council sets. Now, this year it gets even more complicated because there is a need for a resolution of substantial need that's required by RCW when inflation falls below 1%. RCW limits local jurisdictions with a population of 10,000 or more to increase their property tax levy by 1% or inflation, whichever is less. And inflation is measured using the implicit price deflator, which is the ratio of the current dollar value of the personal consumption expenditure series to its corresponding dollar chain value multiplied by 100. So that's also complicated, but suffice to say that it is the measure of inflation that the state uses. This year it's less than 1%, it's 0.06. So council must pass a resolution of substantial need. Now, so when we bring the property tax ordinance to council next week, at the next council meeting, this will be included with that ordinance. And this must pass with a majority +1 to be allowed to take that 1% property tax increase. Now, both the ordinance and the resolution must be passed by the end of November to increase our levy. And we need to get them to the assessor by the end of November. So what's the impact of a 1% increase? So citywide, it's $194,000 increase to our levy amount. That excludes affordable housing levy, which has a fixed amount. And we know that with discussions with the assessor that our new construction will be $314,000. So all told, our property tax levy will go up to $28.2 million. I will note that new construction is new construction that happened over this year, and we get to charge it the property tax next year on this year at this year's rate. So just to make it more complicated. On a $450,000 home, That's going to be about a $15 increase, that 1%, or 900 with a total bill of $920 for the city portion. Again, that assumes that the AV didn't change. So obviously on any home, it will be a different number than that. Now getting into a little more detail here, just to show you how that money is distributed through the various levies in the city. And we see that general fund's going to increase by 340,000, greenways by about 110, and the fire and police pension by $55,000 for a total of 509 of increased property tax revenue. You see our rate, because the AV is going up, our estimated rate will be somewhere around $1.91. We don't have final AV numbers, so we don't know what that'll be. That's just an estimate. Moving on. Oh, and just one more piece about that. These are the numbers that will show up in the property tax ordinance that appears before you at the next council meeting. Now, I've received some questions about bank capacity, so I just wanted to touch on that. As with everything with property tax, it too is complicated. So bank capacity accumulates when the city doesn't take its 1% of property tax increase annually. And it's based on the highest lawful levy that the city could be taking. And I've contacted the assessor and gotten that number. And it can be taken by just stating the intent in the property tax ordinance. But where it gets complicated is the total bank for the capacity for the city is actually around $3 million. And this includes capacity related to the voted rate of the home levy and the greenways levy. So when we say that when we put the home levy on the ballot, for example, we said we wanted to bring in $4 million a year. Well, we had to estimate what that rate was because we didn't have an assessed valuation number, a final assessed valuation number for it, but we needed to make sure it was at least high enough to bring in the $4 million that we were telling the electorate that we wanted to bring in. Now it ended up the AV was quite a bit higher actually that year than it would have been. So that rate ended up creating a bunch of capacity due to the home levy that would disappear. I mean, ignoring the fact that that levy was intended to be fixed at that $4 million amount. Additionally, it would disappear if the levies expired or renewed at a different rate. So it would cause problems down the line if the city were to take that total bank capacity. So I've come up with something called the real bank capacity. And I asked the assessor to come up with a number that excluded any capacity related to levy lid lifts. So I said, what would our highest lawful levy be if both those levies expired at the end of 2020? And so we came up with a number, and that left a real bank capacity, what I'm calling real bank capacity, of about $338,000. So that is the amount that could be taken. Although at this point, the administration is not making that recommendation. So that is the revenue forecast. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I think we're going to let's go to the public hearing first.
Oh, sorry, public hearing first. Sorry.
That's okay. And then we'll ask questions. So I will now open up the public hearing. And I just want to reemphasize this is a public hearing on the 2021-2022 revenue forecast, including 2021 property taxes. It is not a public hearing on the budget. So Elizabeth, do we have anybody signed up?
No one signed up.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing, turn it back to council. Does council have any questions for Forrest? Well, my head's spinning. I guess nobody else's is. So, okay. Thank you, Forrest. We will see you next week or a couple of weeks. Now I will turn it to the mayor for his presentation.
Jean, we need to do the public comment.
You know, one of these days I'm going to get this right.
That's okay.
We'll now go to the 15-minute public comment period. I just want to explain something that happened 2 weeks ago. We had a computer glitch during our public comment where voices were being overheard. This was not intentional in any way. And I know there's a couple of speakers who got very angry about it, but to those speakers, if you're back tonight, you'll get an extra 40 seconds because it was done by our computer system. It wasn't deliberately done by anybody else. And I'd also like to please ask that you don't swear and really get angry at us. Just state your piece and do it as nice as you can. So Elizabeth, go ahead.
The first speaker is Gabe Araujo.
Arajo.
Go ahead, sir.
All right. My name is Gabe Arajo, and I've lived in Bellingham for just over a year. I fully support and stand for Bellingham passing the policy to make all new buildings electric. I support this cause because carbon pollution and fossil fuels are a huge issue in our environment, and it will not be solved without this policy in place. We have no time to delay taking action on this climate crisis. And it would be good for Bellingham to be the first city in Washington to pass this bill. We can be the ones to start a big movement across Washington state. As a college student who has cared about the environment all my life, the opportunity to be part of such a wonderful, the opportunity to pass this policy is like a miracle, and I see no reason why we shouldn't pass it immediately. And if we pass this policy, a reputation will be made in Bellingham as the city that truly cares and acts for the environment. That is why I stand for this policy. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Next person is Warren Shay.
You there, Warren?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Warren Shea, and I've been a resident of the York neighborhood for 26 years and a volunteer at Resources for about 10 years. And I'm a graduate of the Al Gore Climate Change Training Program. I don't need to tell you it's an increasingly dirty, unhealthy, and dangerous world we live in. So I'm here tonight to urge you to take an important step in the right direction. I'm asking you to make Bellingham the first city in the state of Washington to pass an electrification ordinance, and to do it this year. I can give you a million reasons why we should do this, but first and foremost, I was here on June 10th, 1999, when we suffered the horrific Olympic gas pipeline explosion, which snuffed out the lives of 3 of our young people, including my friend Liam Wood, only 18 years old and the only child of my friend and neighbor, Marlene Robinson. This was devastating. Fossil fuels continue to be dangerous and polluting. It's time for meaningful change. It has been almost a year since you received the recommendations of our Climate Action Task Force, and one of their most important recs was to heat new buildings with electricity instead of natural gas. The largest source of greenhouse gas pollution in the state of Washington are natural gas heated buildings. And as you know, natural gas is made by fracking, a monstrously polluting process. Electrification of new buildings is an idea whose time has come. It's already been implemented in several California cities with great success. And Bellingham is the perfect launching pad for a Washington version. We are proud of our reputation for environmental awareness and action. Now, I know you folks don't have an easy job. There are many competing interests that are pressuring you to maintain the status quo. But now, more than ever, we've got to ask ourselves, what kind of a world are we leaving behind for our kids, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren? Do we want to leave them a dirty, polluted, and dangerous planet, or a world that is clean, safe, and healthy? Let's do the right thing here, and let's do it this year. Time is running out. Thank you.
Thank you, Warren.
Matt Buckmaster.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for this opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Matthew Buckmaster, and I live in the Sea Home neighborhood here in Bellingham. I am a father and certified high school English teacher. I'm here in support of the mandate for electrification of new construction in Bellingham. I've lived here long enough to witness the devastating gas pipeline explosion, and yet I currently own a home that depends on natural gas. The fact that I have to have an alarm in my home to warn me when my water heater or stove or furnace suddenly fails makes me anxious just saying it, let alone being responsible for keeping those appliances maintained and a fresh battery and the monoxide detector. Maybe I'm the only one, given the 2020 memes and commentary. I suggest I'm not, but I can really do with less worry and uncertainty right now. Requiring new homes and buildings to be all electric would create safer, more efficient dwellings and move Bellingham toward a cleaner and more sustainable future. I taught for 3 years in China, and I saw the long-term effects of a city's dependence on fossil fuels. The desertification of Beijing is very real. According to the air quality index, any number of the cities in China frequently surpass 150. And my very decision to leave the country was due to a month-long experience of an AQI exceeding 300. That's every day with an AQI over 300. The air was similar to our recent conditions with the forest fires on a daily basis. This is only an example. Climate change is not a China problem. Much of our natural gas comes from fracking, which causes a wide variety of environmental and health problems. Shouldn't we lead the way in limiting our dependence on fossil fuels? Climate change is real, and it's more directly affecting every part of the planet each year. What are we doing to improve our own sustainability? Bellingham is an ideal location for fully electric buildings. We are already an eco-conscious public, and that is directly reflected in our representatives. The council's action on the Cherry Point decision has been widely supported by local citizens, and for a long time. I have attended several project planning meetings for the new school buildings, including options and Seaholm High School. Choices for functional efficiency and ecological sustainability were discussed and ultimately implemented in both those buildings. So already ecological considerations and the long-term effects of how we build are influencing the industry. Let's not only encourage that forward thinking, but make a commitment to mandatory electrification in all new construction and become a model of modern city planning. I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Howard Scharfstein.
Good evening. My name is Howard Scharfstein. For the past 3 years, I have resided in the Happy Valley neighborhood and worked part-time as an adjunct professor at Western Washington University, teaching classes in environmental law and energy policy for the Huxley College and Energy Institute. I speak to you tonight as a supporting member of Stand.Earth and Climate Solutions. I ask this council to advance the far-sighted Climate Action Protection Plan update you adopted in 2018 by accepting the Climate Action Task Force recommendation that Bellingham decarbonize its buildings. Please swiftly enact an ordinance requiring that new buildings be all electric. This action will brand Bellingham as a climate policy leader by becoming the first city in Washington to do so. All electric buildings are not only the future, they are available now. Cost-effective technology makes the electrification of new residential and commercial buildings clean, affordable, and efficient. I am here to testify that relinquishing fossil gas is not only easy, it makes life better. My family lives in an all-electric home that is both highly efficient and remarkably comfortable. We use a chiller system, which is a heat pump connected to radiant heating and cooling tubes that run throughout our floors. This HVAC system keeps our home around 72 degrees and delivers abundant hot water. We installed an induction stove and steam oven so we can cook safely and efficiently. Our clothes dryer also uses heat pump technology. By going all electric, we save the cost of a gas pipeline connection and avoid the safety risk of living with explosive and flammable fossil gas. Notably, we now live in a healthier home. Even when operated correctly, the gas cooking appliances we used in the past emitted dangerous air pollutants, particularly NOx, CO, PM2.5, and formaldehyde. These pollutants seriously compromise air quality and are known to cause respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurological health issues. Homes with gas stoves emit 50% to 400% more NOx emissions than homes with electric stoves. With rooftop solar, I am pleased to report we emit even less air pollution than that. Decarbonization means moving away from fossil gas. It is clear that all electric buildings are the future. Retrofitting existing buildings raises policy challenges the City Council does not face when mandating that all new buildings be all electric. Let's start with new homes and lead Washington and the nation into cleaner, safer energy future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kendra Cook.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm changing the gears a little bit. I'm requesting City Council to not defund the police. Bellingham already provides the defund the police group's demands. In addition to the Bellingham Promises programs, Bellingham has multiple programs supported by the 1/10 sales tax revenue for parenting support, drug abuse programs, behavioral health support for criminal justice system, assistance for offenders in the criminal justice system, and housing assistance. Last year, a crisis triage center opened and is co-located with the detox facility. Now, 69 low-income apartments are near completion on Sandwich Way. The cost, over $20 million. The police were not defunded. Millions of dollars in grants for nonprofits supporting social services and mental health are available, and many are left unclaimed each month. Northwest Youth Services received $3 million in grants in 2018, and their golf tournament fundraiser raised over $357,000. Nonprofits have fundraising privileges. The police do not. I request that the fund group be proactive and volunteer in fundraising or for social service nonprofits, or establish their own nonprofit. But such work is not their agenda. Instead, the defund group's goal is to defund the police by using social services as a decoy. They are using false narratives to discredit the police, even though they have no law enforcement experience themselves. Seattle is a prime example. Seattle Socialist Councilmember Sawant is being recalled for her radical defund the police actions. Less people call 911 due to lack of response time of understaffed Seattle PD, even though 1 in 17 people will experience violent crimes against them or their property. Murderers in Seattle total 49 people killed this year, up from 28 last year. Business and homeowners are fed up with the Seattle Council and the defund group. Many Seattle businesses have closed and relocated. Homeowners have purchased homes in safer cities with city councils that support the police. The owners of Steepologies, who are immigrants, blame efforts to defund the police for their closing their tea business in Seattle, stating, "What city council has done has been more detrimental to our business than a global pandemic." They also stated, "The SPD was already shorthanded. We would have rather paid more taxes to help the homeless and drug crisis situation than take SPD off the streets." Steepology stores outside of Seattle are thriving, where their employees and customers feel safe. This illustrates the only thing more expensive to a community than funding a police department is not having one that is adequately funded. So I request the City Council not to fund the Bellingham Police Department so the police can adequately fill their empty positions to maintain community safety. Please do not be like Seattle. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person is Brianna Kench.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. I just want to thank y'all for listening. My name is Brenna Kench. I'm 47. I've been in Whatcom County my whole life, spent over half of it in Bellingham. I got in trouble with the law as a kid. I have spent a chunk of my life homeless. I'm now married to an amazing man, and I'm a local business owner and a farmer. I credit the fact that I survived my teenage years to a sergeant with the Bellingham Police Department. He didn't save my life because he didn't care. He didn't save my life because it was his job. He talked me out of taking my own life because he cared. He gave me resources. He cared, and I'm here because of him. So if my research is correct, our law enforcement funding makes up roughly 19% of the budget. And it's my understanding that there's a proposal to cut that little 19% by over 40%, talking about a loss of 20 jobs. Are you guys already aware that 911 calls officers can't respond to because there isn't enough? How are you going to feel if someone breaks into your home to hurt you and they don't get there in time because they're already helping someone else? To me, that just is completely and totally illogical. You know, do you all want to have to be in the shoes of the officer that had to call the father of the two 7-year-old twin girls that were shot by their mom before she took her own life to let him know that? You think being a police officer, it takes a special person. It takes a gifted person and a person who's willing to do a lot for a very small return. And it's sad that that return now it's being proposed for it to get even smaller. They risk their life every day. I'm curious if any of you have ever done a ride along with an officer, and if you have, how long it's been since that happened. A friend of mine just sent me a statistic that Washington State, sorry, I have an anxiety disorder, so this is a big deal for me. But that the deaths of our police officers is up 300% since 2013. That just absolutely blows my mind. Then we've got our elected officials who, you got to be intelligent. You got to be able to think logically to be where you are. There is no logic in taking money away from public safety. I can't wrap my brain around that. I love my officers. I love the fact that I feel safe where I'm at. I'm out in the county and our sheriffs are amazing. I don't know much about the local PD because I live outside city limit. But I know I've talked to them a lot. I know when I see them on the street, I stop and say, hey, how's it going? And I hear that they're arresting criminals and they're getting out of jail before the paperwork's even done. That doesn't make me feel safe. Taking money away from these guys doesn't make me feel safe. I'm also aware that there were 2 behavioral health officers and one of them no longer has a job because there isn't funding. That too just blows my mind. So yeah, we have issues all over the country right now, but when criminals get themselves killed because they broke the law or overdosed on drugs, and somebody comes in and says, no, it wasn't the criminal's fault, it was our officer, even when the court of law says that's not the case,
Time,
I don't see how defunding can happen.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person is Alex Rommel.
Good evening, Council. Alex Rammel. I'm here in my capacity as a climate policy advisor for Stand.Earth. So while the city's climate plan isn't on the agenda this evening, I'm really looking forward to next meeting's presentation and the discussion of how our community can move forward. It's been nearly a year since the Climate Action Task Force forwarded their recommendations to you, and they had deliberated for more than a year in developing those policies. I think you're all familiar enough with the urgency of the climate crisis to know that we need to begin acting swiftly. And I understand it's important for the city to be careful and deliberative in this policy area, but we should be looking for easy wins along the way. So there's no way for the city to meet the city or the state or the Paris climate goals while still using fossil gas to heat buildings. Converting that system and all of the buildings already in existence to clean electric sources is a thorny problem. It's going to take years and a lot of money. And it's an equity issue because if we're not deliberate and avoid perpetuating historical injustices, the people left dependent on and paying for an aging and expensive gas system will be low-income people and disproportionately people of color. The task force's recommendations address this, but implementing those parts of the recommendations are going to take some time. I get it. But we can stop digging the hole deeper right now. This is one early action item that can be implemented with little to no cost, and I believe on a very short timeline. New construction for homes and commercial buildings can be all electric. The technology for high efficiency heat pumps is ready to go now, and it's cost effective in new construction. Recent research from the Rocky Mountain Institute found that in Seattle, new electric homes compared to gas heated homes save a few $1,000s in upfront cost. They save another couple of $1,000s in heating costs for the resident over the next 15 years, and that prevents about 28 tons of carbon dioxide pollution. My hope is that you and your team will work steadily on this in the next few months to implement this policy this year. Stand.Earth has launched our Safe Cities campaign to promote policies just like this that stop the expansion of new fossil fuel infrastructure. And we're inspired because In California, about 2 years ago, Berkeley passed a similar policy. Within 6 months, a dozen other cities in California had followed suit, and many more have done so since. I've been talking with local government leaders around Washington. There are communities that are standing next to the pool wondering how cold the water is. And if Bellingham is the first to jump in, your leadership can be catalytic. This is a significant and meaningful step to prevent climate change that you can take this year, and it'll make a big difference. And I and Stand.Earth are here to support you however we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.
Next person is Joelle Robinson.
You there, Joelle?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, I'm Joelle Robinson. I live in Fairhaven, and I just thank the council so much for your service and for the opportunity to speak here tonight in support of building electrification as a key climate solution. You can't see him, but this is my 10-month-old son, Atticus, right by my side. When I gave birth to him last December, I didn't imagine a worldwide pandemic along with record wildfires and horrible smoke. And then as a new mom, I really worry about a lot of things. And on top of, keeping him safe from coronavirus and wildfire smoke, I learned that my home that is heated with fossil gas and has a fossil gas stove are also possibly hurting him. The American Lung Association says that cooking on my gas stove for 1 hour makes the indoor air quality so poor that it would actually be illegal outside, in that it's above the approved level of outdoor pollution. I was so concerned to find out that children in homes with gas heating and stoves have a 42% chance of contracting asthma in their lifetime. So I went ahead and got an induction burner, and I actually love it. It heats his soft-boiled eggs so much faster than the gas stove, and I don't have the underlying stress that I'm harming my child as I cook him breakfast. But that just addressed one part of the problem. In addition to the indoor and outdoor air pollution gas stoves create, they also greatly contribute to climate pollution. And buildings are the second highest source of greenhouse gas emissions in our state. We all know that the world's top scientists have said we have a very small window of time to reduce our emissions significantly to avoid the worst climate impacts. And of course, as has been stated, we've already been experiencing a bunch of them recently firsthand with the terrible West Coast wildfires. I'm first and foremost a mom to this amazing little guy. I'm also an organizer at Climate Solutions. And I do this work because I care so deeply about the quality of life we experience, and especially the legacy we are leaving for Atticus's generation and his grandkids. I'm so grateful for the way that Bellingham has thoughtfully created the Climate Action Committee and these recommendations. And I am looking to you to lead our state and set an example for other cities in Washington and in the nation. And I hope you will lead in passing an all-electric ordinance for new buildings by the end of this year. The people want climate action, and I know we can do this. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Michael Shavario.
Go ahead, Michael. Michael, are you there?
Hello.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Michael Shavario. I've lived in Bellingham for 52 years. And I understand that next meeting on November 9th, you guys are going to be having a presentation on the issue of electrification of HVAC systems in homes and other buildings in Bellingham. And other folks have testified about this today, and I pretty much agree with all of them. In my view, no new buildings should have natural gas heating systems. As you know, from a presentation you all saw recently, the Bellingham Housing Authority's new complex on Samish Way will not have natural gas systems. And recently, the Bellingham Public Schools decided to build two of the 4 buildings that are currently in their construction pipeline with electric heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. I myself recently converted my home to 100% electric heat and appliances, and I love it. It would have been less costly to plan and construct my house originally with electric heating than it was to retrofit, although I will realize cost savings in a few years. But this applies to larger buildings even more, city buildings, school buildings, etc. It's much more expensive to retrofit than it is to plan and build with electric systems from the start. This is what we need to do. So because of this fact that it's easy, much easier to start with all electric systems rather than retrofit, and because of the reality of the existential threat of climate change, it's essential that the city of Bellingham mandate that all new construction be natural gas free. And I know you guys that passing a mandating ordinance won't be a smooth ride. There's going to be bumps. There's going to be a lot of opposition. It's going to be organized. It's going to be hard on you. But it's got to be done. And myself and a lot of other people have your back. Most of you know me. Most of you know that I stand by my word. And I'm telling you, if you do this, and you get a lot of opposition, myself and everybody I can bring to the table will be behind you. So please consider doing this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
HK?
Go ahead.
Hello, how's my sound?
Very good.
Great. Elizabeth, I'm ready to start my time comment now.
Yep.
Heather Katahdin speaking, tax-paying resident since 1989. First, I wish to share, I'm grateful for the work of city council and staff, and I'm especially grateful for the good work done by the staff at Base Camp Shelter and the Northwest Youth Service Day Center, the PAD. I'm speaking as a citizen witness for what I saw and heard last night, Sunday, October 25th, 2020, cold streets of downtown Bellingham. Quote on what I heard spoken to a citizen by a public shelter staff. I'm sorry, I can't let you in. We are full. We are at capacity, 200 people, unquote. Last night, I found and greeted a young woman, legally a youth at age 17, underdressed for the weather. She is sober, alert, oriented 3 times, gave her name as Sabrina. She asked for help and reported her phone battery dead and was looking for a store with a charging square, looking for a place to stay at night, walking around Lighthouse Mission neighborhood in the dark without a car. She stated she used to have a place to stay with a roommate in Ferndale. She used my charged phone to call Base Camp Shelter to request if she could come to their lobby for a phone charging and to warm up. She dialed, made her request. Night staff stated, I'm sorry, I can't let you in. Age 18 and over only. I was not able to ensure she had a place to stay after our base camp call. Later, I phoned Northwest Youth Service and received a recorded message with no directions for youth in need. I did locate their day center for the youth, the PAD, and the staff shared they were at overnight capacity, but if a youth came who needed to charge their phone, they could charge their phone. May we all keep our eyes open for Sabrina and our youth. May they find safe shelter, as the winter youth ground floor shelter also wasn't open. However, the bars on Holly Street were open late, lit up on our public sidewalks and streets, adorned with outdoor dry warming spaces and some picnic tables and propane hand warmers radiating heat. Workers there are so kind to their customers, but their signs state no youth under age. I walk past the Black Sheep Cafe and I hear a highly distressed elderly male yelling and banging on metal cans as he makes his way up Holly Street, slowly pushing an overloaded cart.
Time.
We are one community. Let it stand that the shelters have been full, both base camp and the shelter for the youth.
Thank you.
Aaron Corday.
Are you there, Aaron?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to dismantle a false claim. The myth that social workers are safer, more just, honest, or more humane in all circumstances than police for protecting vulnerable people and community safety. My very first memory of life is of a police officer rescuing me. My parents were drug addicts and abandoned me and my brother and sister, and we were starving. Luckily, a neighbor noticed newspapers piling up and called police. They came immediately. What if our neighbors had called social workers instead? We all know it's often weeks or never before social workers can follow up on reports like this. I don't know if I would be alive today if neighbors had called social workers instead of police. But instead of dying, my first memory of life is of a police officer carrying me in his arms, giving me food and saving my life. I was 3 years old. A few days later, social workers lied to us, saying us kids would stay together, then dropping us off at separate foster homes. So my first experience in life of being lied to was by a state social worker. At 4 years old, police saved us again from a domestic violence situation. My sister was being strangled and my stepmother took out a rifle. Police de-escalated the situation and nobody got hurt. At 10 years old, we were on welfare, and I will never forget the weekly humiliating visits from the social worker who talked down to my stepmother, grilled her about her sex life in front of us kids, and judged our lifestyle. I've never seen a police officer do anything like that. At 15 years old, police rescued me from a foster home where I was being sexually abused. Just imagine what it feels like to be literally rescued, to feel safe and cared for after being abandoned and physically abused. But that feeling of safety was destroyed the same day when a social worker strip searched and cavity searched me nude in front of male staff. This was more traumatizing than the sex abuse. It was dehumanizing and humiliating. A few months later, I watched my new stepmother kicking my sister in the head while she was helpless on the floor. When I asked my teacher for help, when I told them we were being beaten up every day, instead of calling police, they called the school counselor, who called my father, who then told my stepmother, and that night I was beaten up again. If only our teachers had called police instead of social workers. I'm telling you, it is ignorant and magical thinking to imagine that social workers are in any way more humane, more empathetic, professional, or respectful than police. I'm not saying social workers are bad. Most are just like police, good, decent people who want to help others. But let's not conflate their roles. They have different priorities. Please stop pretending social workers are any more accountable, more fair, safer, or more humane than first responders. Stop pretending we can transfer the critical role of police to social services.
Time.
More funding for bilingual officers and law enforcement. We need to restore downtown bike units and outreach. Please say no to defunding police and no to cutting their positions. Thank you.
Amanda Stewart.
Hi. I just first off want to say it's really good to hear so many people backing this climate initiative. Something that it makes me think of, though, through hearing everybody talk about it, first of all, I'm here to talk about defunding the police. It's interesting to hear a lot of the community voices, and it kind of brings a lot of things to mind. It would be nice to see so many people really excited to get together to back something that would be as equitable to the community as making us climate good, for lack of better terms. So most of all, just here to talk for what our community wants, which is defunding the police, funding social programs, Police don't actually prevent crimes from happening. They aren't equipped to respond to the root cause of what causes crime. Funding social programs that meet people's needs like housing, economic opportunities, mental health and substance abuse treatments are the programs that will actually help crime from happening and make people safer. So even if we had the kindest, most compassionate, well-trained police officers, which I think that there's some, that's a side point, never mind. That would not get to the root cause of why people are suffering and committing crime, including drug charges and criminal trespassing and property theft, which according to the Vera Institute's report on incarceration in Whatcom County, that's what a majority of the offenses in Whatcom County are for. So additionally, if there's a cry for mental aid services, I understand that social workers aren't the golden gift that's going to save all of this. But if we were to take funding from the police, which plenty of people have good interactions with the police, of course, and plenty of people who have higher risk involved have bad interactions with the police. It's one thing to think that maybe one of them will be mean to you one day, but I mean, I'm a white woman, maybe they'll be mean to me, but at least I'm not gonna die for it. And it just hits a point where like, assisting in mental health crises seems more important for somebody who could be trained to do that, to help respond to it. Putting a sticker on a cop's badge that says mental health officer, that's not fixing anything. You can train them and stuff, but if they're there to help enforce the law as a traditional role of a cop, which is the job they wanted, being a mental health cop isn't any different. And honestly, it's completely unequitable to your community. We're asking for cops to be removed from that situation so people feel safer, and it eliminates that job from a cop. So it just seems like there is not a listening being done, and it's not equitable to the community. I also just want to reiterate that there were 4 listening sessions held on race and justice in this community, leading so many people in this area. Oh, well, defund the police. All right, thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Jory Mitchell.
Hello. Yeah, my name is Joy Mitchell, and I was born and raised here in Bellingham. And I currently live in downtown Bellingham and work in Fairhaven. And yeah, I've heard the comments about public safety, and I would like to see the city budget for 2021 and 2022 reallocate a significant amount of funds away from the Bellingham Police Department and towards programs that actually keep people safe, such as expanded mental health services, safe, secure, and affordable housing, expanded substance abuse treatment and harm reduction services, food sovereignty programs, job training programs, and yeah, there's a lot more that I would like to see funded. We really need a mental health crisis first responder program that would respond to mental health crises instead of the cops. So train professionals in the field that are not carrying weapons. And additionally, I think that we should not criminalize drug charges. And we need to decriminalize drug use and treat it as the public health crisis that it is, and fund evidence-based treatment programs. And yeah, police do not prevent crimes from happening, and crime isn't random. We need funding for social programs that will actually help our neighbors meet their needs and keep them safe rather than paying police to brutalize our neighbors. As a downtown resident, I see this need directly. And yeah, we need to reallocate funds from the excessive Bellingham Police Department budget and use that money towards social programs like the ones I mentioned. And I urge Mayor Fleetwood and city council members to pay attention to the needs and asks of the most vulnerable in our community, because the decisions you make affect us significantly. Most of us don't have the privilege of having a law enforcement officer take special interest in our safety. Yeah, I yield my time.
Thank you very much.
Irina Lambrow.
Hi. For the record, my name's Irina Lambrew. Thank you all for having me, and thank you, council members, for giving me some time to speak. Anyhow, I just stated my name. It's getting a little late in the evening. I'm a resident of Bellingham, specifically the South neighborhood. I've lived here since 2010, and I come to you as a teacher at Whatcom Community College, but I'm also a realtor. I hang my license at John L. Scott here in Bellingham, so I feel like I wear different hats in this community. But anyhow, I am in support of passing a policy that will decarbonize our buildings in Bellingham and help us move towards a clean energy future for the following reasons. Bellingham should be the first city in Washington to pass a policy to require new buildings to be all electric. Electrifying buildings is a key component of the most cost-effective path to achieving deep greenhouse gas emission reductions, according to Washington's Deep Decarbonization Pathway Study. In Seattle, an all-electric single-family home has 93% lower carbon emissions than a home with gas appliances due to more efficient appliances and increasingly low-carbon electricity. We can expect similar numbers here in Bellingham. If new buildings are continued to be built with natural gas infrastructure, low-income residents will bear the highest burden of costs for rising gas prices and retrofit conversion to all electric buildings. Because of these reasons, this is why I'm in favor of passing a policy or an ordinance that will make Bellingham the first city that's really standing against fossil fuel expansion in the state of Washington. I truly believe that we can be a leader. Thank you, council members, for your time, and I yield my time. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Crystal Rodriguez.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. My name is Crystal Rodriguez, and I'm following up on an email I sent to Mayor Fleetwood, City Council members, and Chief Dahl a couple weeks ago, alerting you that Bellingham police officers are not regularly wearing masks while in close contact with homeless community members. Since then, I've learned that officers have been seen in the hospital not wearing masks, and that other law enforcement officials are not always wearing masks when pulling people over for traffic infractions. This, simply put, is unacceptable. Since July, there's been a governor-ordered mandate to wear masks. This is not optional. Our police officers should be setting an example and complying with this mandate. I'm calling on Chief Dahl to follow in the footsteps of the New York Police Department. As reported by the New York Times on October 4th, that police department directed all officers to wear masks or face disciplinary action. If Bellingham Police is truly committed to community, as they say they are, we should see a commitment to wearing masks. It is one of the most meaningful preventative measures our police officers can take to protect Bellingham residents and minimize the spread of COVID in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Marcus D. Stidham.
Hi, this is Marcus D. I'm the vice chair for Homes Now, and I am not speaking in that capacity tonight as much as I am speaking. I'm wearing my other hat and speaking in the capacity of as a homeless advocate for Whatcom County on the Homeless Strategies Work Group. It's an advisory group that is made to help advise all of you to how to proceed with homelessness in Bellingham. It's a great group with a lot of great ideas. Promote the general welfare. You've heard me say it before in there before. Yeah, this is what we're doing. Promote the general welfare. You've all taken your oath to the Constitution. This is the preamble of the Constitution. This is one of the tenets of the Constitution. Promote the general welfare. So if your budget doesn't currently reflect promoting the general welfare, then you're failing to meet your mandate right there. And we have to do something about that. We should maybe be doing something about that while we're looking at our budget. I'm very happy to hear Hannah Stone reported at the Homeless Strategies Work Group last Friday that there's a moratorium on the camp cleanups, and it is based on a lack of availability of beds rather than the CDC recommendations or anything else, which are still quite in flux in that program from my perspective. And I believe there needs to be more oversight on that. Regardless, the police force has been very busy today, and I invite you all to please have a good look at the police blotter and tell me what you think of that. I look forward to trying somebody make some heads or tails out of that. everybody can just go ahead and have a look at that. As homeless advocate, you have been advised to, for well over a year, I have sat there and said over and over again on the record that you need to reallocate funds from the way over bloated police cleanup budget for camp cleanups, which is an overtime position for any officer that does it. So every 2 officers is paid for 3 just for being there. And the budget is just ridiculous. They just spend fire hoses of money moving people around. As you've heard me just crying about it. This is a COVID emergency and people are getting moved around. The officers aren't wearing masks. The people they're moving aren't wearing masks. Nobody's protected from it. And they're all helping each other push, pull, drag their stuff across the street to satisfy the police order. I've read the policy. What I observed definitely meets what the police define as sweeps, and that's the way that went. But as homeless strategies work groups, homeless advocate, I'm advising you to please provide emergency sheltering for the people you are displacing with that program. Defund is a tough word. Reallocate, I've been calling for well over a year, that bloated fund, and put that into sheltering immediately.
Time.
For any partners that come.
Thank you.
Catherine Orlowski.
Catherine, are you there?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Catherine Orlowski. As a resident of our community, I'm concerned about ticketing people for violating the 6-block ban downtown and any sweeps during the encampment moratorium. It's getting very cold outside. Please make sure we have adequate emergency shelters in place ASAP. Please take a moment to imagine sleeping outside in the freezing temperatures or even spending the entire day outside. We're at capacity. We've been hearing a lot of this. We should have adequate resources, not the Bellingham Police Department managing homelessness. As a homeless advocate for homes now, not later, we desperately need sheltering options. I implore you to do everything you can to get these tiny houses, villages, up and running. Many of them are working and having unprecedented success. It's amazing to see a human feel safe enough to thrive because of their quality of life. With the influx of new residents and due to COVID and the wildfires, our community needs more affordable housing options. COVID has economically impacted all of us. It's very difficult and uncertain. Please do everything you can to prevent homelessness from increasing. We are a community that cares about each other. I don't want to see anyone die this year due to homelessness. Thank you for your time and thank you for all that you do as council members.
Thank you very much.
Emily O'Connor.
Hi, council members.
Hi.
Oh, that. Wish I could be there in person to see all of your faces. It's never fun to just talk to a computer screen, but I have, so Emily O'Connor, Executive Director of Lydia Place, and as most of you know, Lydia Place works within the area of homelessness, particularly focused on families with children. And I've been listening today. I can only imagine how tired you all are by this time. This is a hard field to be doing budgeting in, and I know you're getting a lot of pressure from everywhere with dwindling resources. But there is also some real urgency here, and I think some great opportunity for us to think about how we can do things differently that might result in some different outcomes for us. Pre-COVID, I just want to remind you that 42% of the families in our community were struggling to meet basic needs. And the result of that was that we see outcomes like only 1 in 2 children start kindergarten in our community ready to learn. And when you look at children of color or low income children, only 1 in 4 start kindergarten ready to learn. And when that's the start that we're giving kids in our community, we can then anticipate the outcomes that we see on the other end. These things are only even more important now as we have seen COVID really start to dismantle our resources. And even in a time when we're experiencing eviction moratorium, we've seen the waiting list for homeless families with children more than double in recent months. The last count that I got just last week was that our waiting list contained 62 unsheltered families with children. So unsheltered meaning in tents and cars out in our community. We haven't had any motel funding for a while now. So the families that have been coming in to our coordinated entry system have been turned away. And that has extremely detrimental impact on our kiddos. And so I think as I listen to these budget conversations today, what I see us doing is really clinging to a status quo. And I don't offer that so much as a criticism as I would love for us to think about how might we do things differently? How can we maybe ask different questions on the front end or anchor ourselves in our values such that the budget expenditures look like they match up with the values that we state? And I think if we did that, and if we really started to ask ourselves some questions about creativity, we might be able to come up with some prioritization in our budget that better reflects our values and moves us towards some outcomes as a community toward health that we might really be able to be proud of. And I know that that feels extra challenging in this time, but it's never been more important for us to get it right and for us to do a better job on behalf of our neighbors and those who are struggling most. And we know that, okay. Thank you all so much and good luck.
Thank you, Emily.
Emma Benson.
Hi there. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Emma Benson. I'm a senior design student here at Western. I would like to start off by saying thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to you about climate solutions and how important it is. I would also like to briefly express my appreciation for what Amanda, Jory, Marcus, and others mentioned a few minutes ago about defunding the police, that our call is not to abolish the police, but it's all about reallocating funds towards social services like homeless shelters and other things like that that'll help the community. It's really important, and I feel like our community feels very strongly about it. However, I came mainly to speak about the climate ordinance. Like the vast majority of my peers, I'm deeply passionate about maintaining the health of our planet and everybody on it. That's why I'm so excited to hear about the prospect of switching to all electric new buildings in Bellingham. This is huge. It's the first step that Washington needs, that the country needs to take in the right direction towards preserving our home. To be honest with you, I'm pretty scared. As a 21-year-old, I already feel my future is uncertain. I'm graduating soon and I'm going out into quote the real world. And I'm sure you remember that feeling of excitement with a twinge of anxiety. However, the looming crisis the climate is facing is making it even harder for people my age to picture ourselves in the future. We don't know how long we have, and we don't even know if we'll be able to grow old like our grandparents as we've always imagined. Most importantly for me, I so desperately want to be a mom. I pretty much always have, but now I'm worried. I'm worried about bringing a child into a world whose future is so unstable. But I do have hope. I have hope that there are more people like you who are listening to us and who understand our fears and our worries. I have hope that we'll turn this around, but it has to start now. And what better of a place to start, right? If we can get this done, other major Washington cities will follow, and then maybe Oregon, and then the rest of the country. It all starts with a bold move, and I think that this is it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Michael Studhoff.
Hi, thank you. I want to talk about the 3 mental health officers in which we have planned for our upcoming budget. Let's take a step back and look at this realistically. Are 3 designated mental health officers staff going to answer the entire 90,000 population of Bellingham's mental health needs? I'd say absolutely not. You're setting us up for failure, and we need a program like Eugene, Oregon's CAHOOTS, which stands for Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. And just like Eugene, Oregon, we could have our own cost-efficient program, part supported by state fundraising, volunteer, and behavioral health professionals who attend schooling specifically for this social service. This is not a debate of social worker as our system produces versus police. This is asking for help to fund for a community-supported, compassionate mental health crisis support program. Aaron Corday is way off base from the argument before us. To give you one example, my friend Derek, he was a roommate. He got off lithium. We did not know the case of, or we're not experienced this, and we had to call police. They came to the house, and my roommate's reaction were, when the police were in his room interacting, my roommate said, "Shut the door, I'm ready to take you guys down." My other friend, who did not get the understanding from police officers from not being on medication, was confined from a domestic case in the county jail and was taken off his medications, abused by police of the jailers, and given a federal crimes. He's like 20 years old, young, had nothing in the system before. He eventually needed help in the future, and the trauma from having incidences with police in the past, in calling the police out to his house, he got knocks on the door. The police didn't go in. The police just being there, he ended up killing himself. This is Connor Lieb, and his parents have been real advocates of the anti-jail attacks going on. So these people have involuntary reactions, which are subconscious, and from the trauma that is stored from these repressed, unpleasant memories. My experience is dealing with disabled adults with trauma, this is very true. And police in uniforms, male helping women who've been abused by males in the past, this is not the role as police officers. We need a team of larger people that can be part volunteers and part behavioral health professionals. This is a solution that we need to move towards. We as a society have bit off more than we chew for our roles of police, especially for the how complex society is getting. And we need solutions which are just as complex and adapt.
Thank you.
Kanui Rappaport.
Good evening, council members and people listening in and speakers. My name is Kai, and I'm a Bellingham resident of over 3 years in the Roosevelt neighborhood. I'm a nursing student, a worker, and a community member. And I'm speaking tonight in support of defunding the police in Bellingham. Defunding or reallocation from the police is moving money away from our grossly budgeted police into services that really serve our needs. Crime doesn't just occur in a vacuum. It often occurs because people don't have the access to social services that they need. I want to say that I was pleased to see at least one of you at the recent event standing up against recent actions of white supremacy at the event at the City Council at the Bellingham City Hall, as well as seeing our county executive. However, did one of you engage in one of these discussion circles? Did you listen to an overwhelming number of people there connecting the feeling of being safe with supportive services as well as defunding the police? Several people there asked me about defunding the police. There was clearly some hesitation, but when I told them the police occupy over a third of our budget, that's not just a slogan, but a carefully crafted plan locally by a number of BIPOC-led groups. I ask you all, are you all in solidarity with Black Lives Matter? If so, why are you resisting one of their main calls during this time to defund the police, locally and nationally? We have a contested election coming up, increased tensions among COVID, this recent cold spell, rise in homelessness, and a risk for infections for tenants. I consider that you please, during this time, consider reimagining public safety, one that isn't an imaginary world, but a possible one. And I believe one of the easiest ways to achieve this is to defund the police. I'm speaking tonight because I want you to try to imagine what Bellingham would look like. With fully funded social services, a place where a person who falls through the cracks doesn't have to wake up to 3 police officers armed with limited hours of mental health training. A place that provides housing first. I have a few questions now. As of this point, police are not being defunded, but funded even more. If so, how will you address the use of force of Bellingham indiscriminately affecting people of color? The problems listed in the Vera report. Why are we waiting to allocate a small amount of our police budget to a mental health program like Cahoots? This could reduce calls to our police possibly by up to 20%. What accountability exists for those officers whose legitimate complaints were raised, like the kidnapping of the mentally ill person, and Officer Sarad, who was part of the GRACE program you tout? When will we learn more about this crisis stabilization center? How funded is it? The moratorium for evictions will soon end. Do you think you're capable of addressing this upcoming issue? Many people tonight have, are, and will continue to speak on defunding the police. What will you do to respond beyond the band-aid solutions like your sit and lie ban on the homelessness criminalization and create meaningful solutions? To the community in this council, I encourage you to revisit defundbpd.org to find out more about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's the last one.
Okay, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Now, for the third time, I'll go back to the mayor and say, go for your presentation.
Hey, thank you. Goodness, lots and lots of important things being addressed tonight at public comment. Most of our initial speakers were responding to the climate, and I just want to take a moment and first thank them for expressing themselves. We're fortunate to live in a community where we have as much support for bold climate action as we do here in Bellingham. And I'd like to just observe that we're way ahead of a lot of communities. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot more to do. We need to be very active. Our goal is the same as the people who express themselves tonight, which is to achieve the greatest reductions as quickly as we can. As you know, we're following a deliberative process. We have a climate staff team, a climate staff committee that's making recommendations on a variety of items that came out of the task force. They're being vetted through our approval process. They're coming to you with several of those proposals next month for consideration to be included in our climate action plan, with the intention that the staff will then build sort of detailed implementation plans and prioritize the first measures we should take. I should be careful about saying that. The first measures from the climate task force, we have a robust climate action plan that we've been implementing for a long time that we're very proud of. Tonight grows out of a petition that Stand.Earth and Mr. Rammel put forward. As he knows, we sat down, we listened to him, we understood his reasoning for why he wants us to pass an ordinance this year. We expressed the point of view, the unanimous collective position of our climate staff that as it relates to building electrification, which is something that we very much want to move swiftly towards and intend to do. It is the future. It is going to happen in Bellingham. But precisely when we go about pulling the trigger on that and beginning a bold implementation plan is on a different timeline than what Mr. Rammel would like. It's the point of view of our staff that if we continue to follow a deliberative process that involves effective building of relations with a variety of people in this community, including builders, that will actually be able to make quicker progress on building electrification than if we just follow and pass an ordinance right away. And there's a variety of reasons for that. And we can get into it in a climate committee if we want. And we can go a little deeper into our thinking as it relates to that. But that's sort of where we're at. Rather than express those, his critique of our reasoning, he just went out and mentioned nothing and then lobbied people to come tonight. I'm glad they did. It was a good showing and expression of people's views on this, but the impression that was left by their petition was that we're doing nothing. And in fact, we are very actively and deliberately engaged in putting together plans, and you'll be getting more information as it relates to that. And building electrification is on the list. It's high up on the list. So there will be action taken on that. You get to decide the time frame as it relates to an ordinance. And I look forward to working with you and community members and Mr. Rammel as we go forward on that. But I just wanted to give a little background as it relates to the building electrification effort. We are actively working on that. We heard a lot tonight on a different topic relating to housing and the need to create increased capacity, especially as we go into the winter. There was reference made in a meeting today about the drop-in center. As all of you know, but for the community's benefit that hasn't heard, Christ the King is working to open the drop-in center for an additional 39 people. That is going to be, as I understand it, online at the beginning of November. Staff is also very actively working with our various community partners that deliver housing in our community and seeking to increase additional capacity. We'll be providing updates to you on that as that increased capacity develops. The county, as I think you're aware, is planning to address additional funds for motel vouchers for families. So that's a positive thing. You've received updates from us as it relates to the safe parking program. As you know, we put out a request for proposals for that. As of now, we've not gotten any submittals in response to it. But technically that deadline closes this Friday. We'll see if anything materializes as it relates to that. We've also received a lot of feedback from community members expressing interest in operating a temporary tiny home encampment. And as you know, we have limited city-owned sites available. So our intention is to issue a request for qualifications to help identify a partner in that regard. So we look forward to taking some real action as it relates to temporary tiny home encampments. And we'll keep you updated on all of that. A little information on the Broadband Advisory Committee. We've heard from some folks who are interested in that subject matter, concerned that we're not moving fast enough. As you know, Council supported creation of a broadband advisory committee to inform our public policy on broadband and fiber optics in the future. We're working very actively to seat this committee. We've got a lot of staff members who are working really, really hard in really challenging times. And I just want to assure people that we're not dragging our feet, as one particular person alleged. We're still receiving applications from people who wish to serve on this committee. There's a number of interested parties who have applied, and it's taking a little longer to process them all. But more on that soon. Broadband committee will get seated sooner rather than later, and we'll make progress in that regard. We've gotten a lot of feedback, I suspect many of you have as well, from concerned residents in Bellingham who are concerned about election-related unrest and concerned about whether or not we're preparing for it. And I just want to say that we very actively are monitoring things and preparing for the potential for election day unrest. I feel some degree of confidence that we're not going to see that in our community. I think we're going to be okay, but I think the national news is causing people to worry that it might happen here in the streets of Bellingham. We anticipate increased activation of Emergency Operations Center support for that response. I know our police chief, Chief Dahl, has been actively engaged in planning with our various jurisdictional partners in law enforcement, so that we'll be ready. The fire department, City of Bellingham Office of Emergency Management, our police, our county counterparts in emergency management, including the sheriff's office, and others are all engaged. monitoring things. Update on race and justice work. We continue to make steady progress on building a work plan with many important steps to address race and justice issues. You'll recall some weeks ago, I indicated my intention to declare race as a public health crisis. As you know, the object of that was to help persuade the county department Board of Health to pass a similar declaration and then craft an action plan to prepare for it. There's been some things happening that have slowed things down at the county. They're working on that. I stand by ready to pass that, but we're waiting to get some more information from the county that would inform the wording of our declaration. Meanwhile, I've spoken to County Executive Sadhu. We've both indicated a willingness, if need be, if for whatever reason the Board of Health, which as you know, is the Whatcom County Council, chooses for whatever reason not to do that, that we are prepared to issue a joint proclamation declaring racism as a public health crisis. We're also working to respond to Councilmember Hamill's request, which the whole council responded to, developing a 911 unarmed response option. Staff is very actively engaged presently in scoping this project. We look forward to presenting more information to you as that develops. I think we promised you in September that we'd come back and give you an update on options from where we're at in the month of November. We intend to do that. Finally, we are working on a joint resolution with the county executive to form a joint task force to inform the scope and design of an equity commission. We look forward to presenting that to you in the very near term so we can get moving on that. But we've made some really good headway. I look forward to sharing it with you and getting your feedback, as well as getting feedback from other community members. So with that, we've got a brief report tonight. Before I do that, just a couple things about Halloween. The city of Bellingham is joining our local health officials, encouraging everyone to celebrate safely this year to prevent COVID-19 spreading. And in particular, I'd like to join the county health officials in one of their primary admonitions, which is to discourage door-to-door trick-or-treating. Gotten some feedback, most recently at the Mayor's Neighborhood Advisory Commission from some of our representatives. As I think a lot of you know, we've got some neighborhoods that experience huge volumes of trick-or-treaters. Columbia neighborhood is one such example. And they've expressed concern that lots of people are going to show up, sometimes carloads of them, arriving from other parts of the city and beyond. And we're hearing from these representatives who are saying that they're very concerned about this and opposed to those large groups gathering for trick-or-treating and concerned about the health risks that that would pose. So just wanted to underscore that. I know it's a drag. We've just got to be disciplined through this crazy year. Things are going to get better. We're going to get back to celebrating holidays and special events as we once did. But this is just one of the impacts from this year. So urging all of you in that regard. Now, to tonight, we've got Tara Sundin, our planning staff, who's going to just offer some information relating to Whatcom Restart and the various grant awards. Then Nicole, our Parks Director, is going to speak on a couple of things relating to playgrounds and parks, and Eric Lautenbach, our Health Director, is going to give a brief update. So at this time, I'd hand it over to Tara for a brief report. Thank you, Tara.
Good evening. Reporting out here on Whatcom Restart. We had a number of different programs. We had the business assistance grants, the child care recovery grants, as well as the food and beverage grant program. So I'm just going to provide a quick report on each one of those. Under the business assistance grants, over $3.5 million has been granted to 280 Bellingham businesses. Of that 3.5 million, 1.3 is coming from our allocation of the CARES Act, and 2.2 is coming from Whatcom County's allocation. As you recall, Whatcom County's allocation of CARES is about 4 or 5 times the amount of Bellingham's. 120 of those 280 businesses are located in our city center and Fairhaven districts. And then with regard to childcare recovery grants, nearly $700,000 has been granted to 26 agencies. So that could be a nonprofit or a business countywide. So we think of the childcare industry supporting all of our county, and Bellingham being included in that. $191,000 was from Bellingham and $479 from Whatcom County. Now we got this additional allocation, and so we are deploying some more funds to childcare. That second round just closed late last night or this morning, and we have about $500,000 in requests. We anticipate the county funding the majority of those grants. And then the food and beverage business, as you recall, this is an industry that's struggling quite a bit. We're going into a pretty tough time of the year for food and beverage businesses plus COVID because of the indoor nature of that industry. So we've targeted $544,000, and that's all Bellingham money, to 41 Fairhaven and city center businesses. So all of those businesses have been notified. A thank you again to Councilmember Lillquist and Vargas for helping out. We called upon them to do some additional ranking. And a special thank you to some in-house staff that I haven't mentioned before, which is Amy Cram in legal and Andy, I'll just say Andy A, from finance, for their work thus far. They both are doing a lot of the behind the scenes work. As you can probably imagine, a tight timeline like this is a bit of a struggle. This is literally hundreds and hundreds of contracts and check writing that needs to go out within about the next 2.5, 3 weeks. With that, I'll turn it back to the mayor.
Thank you, Tara. Nicole?
Good evening, Council. I'm just going to briefly update you on what's happening in playgrounds. On the 16th of October, we had officially reopened all of the playgrounds in our 38 playgrounds in Bellingham. We did this in conjunction with the health department and basically copied what guidelines and rules were coming from the city of Seattle, who did a similar thing. This was in large part as a result of the community really being wanting it and seeking safe things to do outside for children. And we reduced our staff significantly in the winter and didn't want to try and keep them taped all winter long. The guidelines are that all children over the age of 2 must wear a mask. We're having a little trouble up at Cordata Park especially, and we've added some bigger signs to that park. That playground has become very popular since we finally were able to open it. We're trying to limit kids to 5, no more than 5 on each structure. Stay home if you're sick, of course. Wash your hands before and after play. And we are keeping the zip line at Squalicum Creek Park closed because it's just too popular. We are not sanitizing or cleaning the playgrounds. And we just are really hoping that people will use those guidelines and just be considerate so we can keep these available for everyone. We also are going to be installing over 100 signs along all of the trail corridors, urging people to mask up, and on the doors of every restroom to remind people to wear a mask, especially when they come in the restroom. You're going to see a lot of new signage throughout the parks. And then lastly, just this month, the state issued some additional guidance regarding athletic practices and special events. We've put together an interdepartmental work group to work in conjunction with the health department on plans and guidelines for next year's events and activities. For now, we are sticking with the emergency order, which canceled all reservations and activities through the end of the year, except for those youth-oriented outdoor programs. That's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Erica Lautenbach.
For some reason, my video isn't working tonight, so I apologize. I just have a few updates for you. Tara mentioned the CARES Act funding. And just to share with you, the health department received $4.5 million last month to spend by the end of the year on programs and services associated with health. And we are going to be using that funding. I briefly mentioned it the last time I saw you a month ago, but we're going to be using that funding for additional behavioral health support in our schools and within our nonprofit organizations. We are using that funding to help our local chambers and downtown business associations and the tourism boards as they embark on a holiday marketing campaign that builds on the Safer, Stronger Together campaign that really promotes the idea of safe and sustainable businesses and getting people to come back to their downtowns and small businesses that are local while maintaining good health and safety practices. And we are providing some funding for additional nonprofit organizations to reimburse them for the changes in the way they're doing operations and in supplies. And we're providing additional funding for all the school districts in Whatcom County to help as they re-engineer classrooms and prepare to get kids back in school in person. So just a little update on that. I think you've probably noticed I send the daily updates. Our cases have not reflected some of the national trends that have been very concerning. They've continued to be fairly low. And we really credit that to people being very diligent when they're out and about. Our uptake of wearing masks and social distancing is above 90%. And that's just a great testament to this community coming together. It's also due to the businesses that have been really, really great partners in working with the health department to keep the cases low. Just to give you an idea, we've worked with over 200 businesses since July in our business response team, and so very few of those have actually had more than 2 cases. So it's they've been really great partners in controlling the spread once it's in the businesses, and we're just continuing to see spread among household members, and just reminding people that the isolation and quarantine facility is available if you can't effectively isolate at home. And we're also seeing it in social contacts. And as you know, we had a very difficult long-term care facility outbreak, but that has largely resolved itself at this point. So again, we're seeing the numbers of people skewing toward the under 40 age category, as opposed to the weeks before when we were really seeing the effects of that long-term care facility outbreak. So lastly, I just want to share that there's been a lot of activity with the state around vaccine planning, and sort of a bright spot in the work that we're doing is thinking about how we administer vaccine and try to get our communities back to a revised normal. And in 2 weeks or 4 weeks at your next meeting that you'd like me to attend, I'm happy to bring our staff to kind of talk a little bit more about vaccines and what the federal responsibility, the state responsibility, and the local responsibility, as well as sort of where we are in planning. So you have that information as well. And if you prefer it via an email or something written, I can do that too. But we're happy to give you a fuller briefing on that at your convenience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. Back to you, Council President Knudsen.
Beth, you have a couple of appointments there under your mayor's report.
Why don't you take over and get some questions, pull that up and make sure I get that. I don't have it open in front of me.
Okay, I'll just say it. The mayor's reappointment of Greg Arnold and Cassidy Thornton to the Community Development Advisory Board. That was for information only. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll go to our committee reports. This morning at 10 a.m. we had a city council special meeting on the 2021-2022 biennial budget. We heard from finance, HR, legal, and IT. And our next session will be next Monday at 1 to 4 p.m. The next committee is Public Works and Natural Resources. It's chaired by Councilmember Michael Lillquist.
Thank you, Gene. We had one item today. It was a briefing on a large fish passage project in the Middle Fork of the Nooksack River. The Middle Fork of the Nooksack River Fish Passage project involves removal of a large portion of the city's diversion dam. And this will restore fish passage. And instead there'll be an installation of a revised fish-friendly intake for municipal water supply. This is a collaborative effort involving the city of Bellingham and significant funding and assistance from American Rivers, the Paul G. Allen Foundation, the National Oceanographic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the Nooksack Indian Tribe, the Lummi Nation, and the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. And in the briefing this afternoon, it also indicated there was cooperation from other agencies and other entities supporting this project. A great deal of the funding actually comes, for example, through the American Rivers and Paul G. Allen Foundation. This project is well underway. It is expected to reestablish access to approximately 16 miles of critical spawning and fish rearing habitat. The project has been under construction since January of this year. Staff showed us pictures, photographs, and some video of the status of that construction. The entire project will be over $23 million when you add in the private grants and the public funding. This was for information only, and that was the end of the report.
Thank you very much, Michael. We will now go to Planning Community Development, which is chaired by Councilmember Holly Huffman.
Thank you. For this committee, we had a discussion about the extension and renewal of an ordinance establishing a moratorium on development applications and permits relating to the redevelopment of the manufactured home parks in Bellingham. On June 3rd, 2018, the City Council approved an emergency ordinance establishing a moratorium on the acceptance or processing of development applications or permits relating to the redevelopment of any of the 10 mobile home parks in Bellingham. The moratorium was extended for 6 months in June 2020 and is set to expire in December of 2020. A new 6-month renewal of the moratorium is needed to allow staff to conduct meetings with homeowners, finalize recommendations, and conduct a Type 6 legislative review process. The committee voted unanimously to recommend approval, and I so move.
Second.
Motion made by Councilmember Huffman, seconded by Councilmember Lillquist. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries 601. Thank you. The next item is Parks and Rec, chaired by Councilmember Lisa Anderson.
Thank you, Council President. Joining me today was Council members Hannah Stone and Michael Lillquist, presented a presentation to the Parks and Recreation Committee for consideration of Bill number 22788. Bellingham Parks and Recreation requested approval of a license agreement with the landowners of the park operated space currently known as Happy Valley Community Garden. Happy Valley Community Garden is one of 3 city-operated community gardens and offers over 100 community garden spots. The garden site, located at 1116 32nd Street, is owned by the heirs of Inez Hoyt. The license agreement would grant exclusive public community garden use and outlined operations, maintenance, and use. The city requested to enter into a license agreement for the continued operation and maintenance of the on-site community garden. The landowners have agreed to grant a 10-year license beginning March 1st, 2020. In addition, the licensee has requested that the garden be named the Sven Hoyt Community Garden in memory of their brother. The committee voted unanimously in support of this agreement, and I so move.
Second.
Motion been made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Huffman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries the motion carries 601. Thank you.
And
Next, yes, thank you, Lisa. The next item is committee of the whole. We had 3 items. The first item is police officer certification. Council requested this presentation concerning police officer certification and decertification processes in Washington State. Director Sue Rahr from the Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission will discuss Washington State processes for terminating certifications per RCW 43-101-135 and her agency's voluntary submission of information to the federal database. Bellingham Police staff will also discuss local hiring processes that focus on avoiding the hire of problematic officers from other jurisdictions. This afternoon, we heard from Chief Dahl, Director Rahr, and Lieutenant Jason Johnson went over how we do it here in Bellingham. We have extensive screening that goes on when we hire new firefighters. They're asked 130 to 140 questions. They go through thorough background investigations, polygraphs, psychological studies, pretty rigorous process. And we also heard from Director Rahr that out of 1,000 who separate from the state of Washington police departments, 100 of them are involuntary, 43 are reviewed decertification, and 13 result in revocation. It was a great slideshow she had. I encourage people to watch this. It was a very comprehensive report. And it, yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. So at the end of the presentation, Ms. Rahr indicated there was some legislation being developed that would come through. It sounded like complicated legislation with parts and pieces that we don't want to stick our noses into. But in particular, there was a loophole that an officer may be deemed unfit and let go by the department for use of excessive force, and that wouldn't trigger decertification. And it seems to me that if there's agreement with the council, perhaps we could add that to our legislative agenda, not to weigh in on the larger issues or the complications that have to do with which commission does what and who does the investigating, but simply the issue that an officer who's found unfit for use of excessive force and let go by the department should be decertified. I'd like to add that to our agenda. I don't know if we can just kind of do it now with a head nod vote or if there's a more formal process that we should engage in.
Does everybody agree with that? I'm getting a lot of head
Is
nods.
that for next session in Olympia, the long session?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay, we'll add that. We'll make sure that's added when the list is brought to us.
Thank you, council members.
Okay, we will now go to approval of the evening session of October 12th minutes.
Move approval.
Motion been made by Councilmember Huthman, seconded by Councilmember Anderson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay, motion carries 5-0. 5-1-1. Okay, that's a difference. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. I just want to make a correction / clarification. I think I indicated that the drop-in center through Christ the King Church was going to be online in November. They're assembling volunteers in November, and they intend to go online with guests in December. So sorry about that. Thanks for letting me clarify that.
Okay, no problem. Okay, any old or new business tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will go to our executive session. We had 4 executive session items. The first item was litigation, State of Washington versus Madrona Bay Real Estate Investments. Whatcom Superior Court, case number 18-20-2347-37. Staff provided information on litigation matter. For information and discussion, no action was taken. Labor Relations, we reviewed proposals for the Bellingham Police Guild, Fraternal Order of Police, and the Guild of Pacific Northwest Employees Local 1937. Labor Relations with the Police Guild. Staff provided information on the proposed 2021 collective bargaining agreement with the city and the Bellingham Police Guild. I will now entertain a motion to ratify the agreement reached with the following general terms. The duration is 2021. Wage increases are effective January 1st, 2021. 2.5% increase in the base rate of pay. Under health insurance, increase employees' premium share for dependents on all benefit plans to 10%.
Move approval.
There a second? Motion been made by Councilmember Anderson, seconded by Councilmember Littlequist. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0-1. The next item was labor relations with the Fraternal Order of Police. Staff provided information on the proposed 2021 collective bargaining agreement with the city and the Fraternal Order of Police. I will now entertain a motion to ratify the agreement reached with the following general terms. The duration is 2021. Wage increases effective January 1st, 2021. A 2.5% increase in base rate of pay effective January 1st, 2021. Increased deferred compensation contribution by 1%. Under health insurance, increase the city's contribution to medical health care by 6% in 2021.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion's been made by Councilmember Anderson, second by Councilmember Littlequist. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries 6-0-1. The next item is labor relations with the Guild of the Pacific Northwest Employees, Local 1937. Staff provided information on the proposed 2021 collective bargaining agreement between the city and the Guild of the Pacific Northwest Employees, Local 1937. Entertain a motion to ratify the agreement reached with the following general terms. Duration 2020 to 2021. Wage increases effective November 1st, 2020, a 2.5% increase in the base rate of pay. Effective January 1st, 2021, a 2% increase in the base rate of pay. Effective July 1st, 2021, a 1% increase in the base rate of pay, and 12 furlough days in 2021. Health insurance increased the city's contribution to medical health care by 5% of each of 2020 and 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, seconded, Councilmember Hamel, seconded by Councilmember Littlequist. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries 6-0-1. Next item was potential litigation. Staff provided information on a potential litigation matter. For information and discussion, no action was taken. The last item was litigation, City of Bellingham versus Baker. Staff provided information on litigation matter. For information and discussion, no action was taken. Consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion been made by Councilmember Hamel, second by Councilmember Huthman. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor will say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carries 6-0-1. Final consideration of ordinances.
Agenda Bill 22778, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, amending the 2019-2020 biennial budget, increasing appropriations and transferring funds, and authorizing retirement of the Drake note debt.
Move third and final.
I'll second that.
Motion been made by Councilmember Huthman, second by Councilmember Littlequist. Is there any, or roll call, excuse me.
Holly Huffman,
Aye.
Jean Knutson,
Aye.
Michael Littlequist,
Aye.
Hannah Stone,
Aye.
Lisa Anderson,
Aye.
Dan Hamel.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 6-0-1 with one excused. Agenda Bill 22779, an ordinance of the City of Bellingham, Washington, amending the 2019-2020 biennial budget, increasing appropriations and projected revenues in the radio communications fund.
Move third and final.
Second.
Motion been made by Councilmember Hamel, second by Councilmember Huthman. Any discussion? Roll call.
Jean Knutson,
Aye.
Michael Littlequist,
Aye.
Hannah Stone,
Aye.
Lisa Anderson,
Aye.
Dan Hamel,
Aye.
Holly Huffman.
Aye.
Ordinance passes 6-0 with one excused.
Okay, thank you very much. Before the next meeting, the next budget session will be Monday, November 2nd from 1 to 4 p.m. But I gotta pay a little tribute tonight to my sidekick in here, Mark Gardner. About 6:58 and a half, my computer got all fouled up due to the fact that I can foul up a TV remote just as much as I can a computer. And within seconds, he got me back up just before I banged the gavel. So thank you, Mark. I wouldn't be able to do it without somebody in here, I can tell you that. So the next meeting of Bellingham City Council will be Monday, November 9th. Meeting adjourned.